Chosen one, when you walked through the shadows of doubt and betrayal, they believed your steps were too heavy to carry you forward. They thought the ground beneath you would crack and swallow you whole, and in their hearts, they celebrated the possibility of your fall. They whispered behind closed doors, weaving stories of your collapse, as though it was already written, and in their eyes, you were nothing but a fragile flame ready to be extinguished by the winds of adversity. But what they never understood is that within every strike against you, a deeper fire was born. Within every attempt to silence your voice, your spirit learned to roar louder. They saw brokenness, but what they overlooked was how every fragment became sharper, more purposeful, more unstoppable. They wanted to see you reduced to ashes, yet ashes are the soil where rebirth takes place, where seeds take root and grow into towering trees that defy storms. Every act of cruelty they aimed at you became the very tool that carved out your strength, shaping you into someone who could not only survive, but ascend beyond every limitation they tried to bind you with. In their bitterness, they thought their actions would suffocate your dreams, but dreams do not die when they are rooted in destiny. They multiply under pressure. They bend, but never break. Your silence in the face of their mockery was not weakness, but wisdom, a patience that confused them because they could not comprehend how stillness can be louder than rage. Every insult, every rejection, every scheme meant to pull you down was secretly placing bricks beneath your feet, building a platform for the rise they never saw coming. The irony of their efforts is that they gave you the very stage they wished you would never stand on. They forged your resilience, sharpened your clarity, and strengthened your faith. While they plotted your downfall, you were quietly preparing for a breakthrough, and though they tried to bury you in darkness, they unintentionally taught you how to find light where no one else could see it. They mocked your beginnings because they thought the starting point defined the end. But the truth is, every seed begins buried. They celebrated when storms came against you, yet storms never destroy seeds that are meant to grow into forests. Storms only water the soil and test the roots. They thought every closed door was a curse. But what they failed to realize is that closed doors are often divine protection, redirections that kept you from pathways too small for your destiny. They took joy in your tears, never realizing that tears cleanse the soil of the soul and water the roots of unshakable growth. They smiled at the thought of your loneliness, but solitude was where you discovered your voice, where you uncovered strength that never depended on applause. And so, every wound they inflicted became a scar that told a story, a reminder not of weakness, but of battles endured and victories claimed. Scars are not signs of defeat. They are trophies of survival. Proof that fire can burn but not consume. Proof that storms can rage but not erase. They wanted to see you shattered, yet the broken pieces of your life refracted light in ways that wholeness never could, painting a mosaic of resilience and divine orchestration. They underestimated the hand that shaped you, the unseen protection that surrounded you, and the power that rises when the world believes you have nothing left. What they thought was the end of your story was simply the turning of a page, a shift into a chapter they could never predict. They believed they had stripped you of everything, yet what they truly did was free you from chains you no longer needed to carry. Their rejection redirected you, their betrayal awakened you, and their cruelty set fire to the very ground from which your rise would begin. Chosen one, before we go deeper into this journey, I want to pause for a moment and invite you to lean into something powerful. This video is not just words you hear and then forget. It is an energy, a reminder, and a transmission meant to meet you where you are and push you toward what is already waiting for you. That's why I ask you to stay with me until the very end, because there are special messages at the conclusion that will touch your spirit in ways you might not expect. And when you reach that point, take a deep breath, write your most heartfelt wishes in the comments, and place the number 777 beside them. That number is not random. It carries the vibration of alignment, divine timing, and open pathways. As you write your wish, you are not just typing letters on a screen. You are releasing energy into the universe, declaring what belongs to you, and aligning yourself with the truth that what is meant for you will never pass you by. Subscribe as well, so you don't miss the reminders and the energy that continues to strengthen your path. This isn't only about watching. It's about participating, sending ripples outward, and allowing your voice to join a chorus of others rising toward destiny. Now let us return to the story. For your story has never been about defeat. When they tried to corner you, they believed you had no way out. Yet it was in those tight places that you learned creativity, resourcefulness, and the power of vision. They tried to close your opportunities, but you learned how to craft new doors where walls stood tall. They wanted you small, hidden in shadows, unseen and unheard. But their very attempts to silence you forced you to dig deeper for your true sound. The voice that could never be silenced because it wasn't born from human approval, but from divine calling. What they thought would crush you only compressed you into something denser, more powerful, like coal transforming into a diamond under unimaginable pressure. Every attempt to diminish you ended up magnifying the glow they could not contain. Their betrayal was meant to poison you, yet it became medicine for your vision. Betrayal forced you to let go of false alliances, to stop carrying the weight of those who never truly walked with you, and it created space for you to see who stood with you in truth. Their rejection was meant to weaken you, yet it freed you from being tied to what could never handle the magnitude of your destiny. They set traps in hopes of watching you stumble, yet those traps became the very lessons that sharpened your steps, teaching you to walk with discernment, no longer blind to the disguises of envy and malice. Every time they believed they had succeeded in pushing you down, they were actually positioning you for a higher climb. For every pit is just a deeper place to build a stronger foundation. Think of how many times they whispered about your downfall, only to witness your persistence. They thought they were watching the end of your flame, but they didn't realize you were only gathering sparks. They thought they were burying you under doubt and ridicule, but they didn't realize they were watering a seed that never needed their approval to grow. In their effort to erase your name, they ended up carving it deeper into the story, because your survival itself became louder than any lie they tried to spread. You didn't just rise despite them, you rose because of them. And that is the irony they can never escape. What they constructed as obstacles became stepping stones. What they threw at you as stones for harm became the very material you built your strength upon. Chosen one, there is a truth that echoes through your journey. Those who plotted against you did not realize that their very actions would be used as the fuel for your transformation. Every insult they spoke became a weight, and though it pressed you down at first, over time it strengthened the muscles of your spirit. What they thought would suffocate you only increased your capacity to breathe in the midst of pressure. They wanted your silence, but silence turned into observation, and observation turned into wisdom. You began to see beyond their games, to recognize the patterns of envy and insecurity that shaped their cruelty. You stopped asking why they hated you, and instead began asking what this was teaching you, what strength was being carved out in your being through the fire of their attacks. That shift in perspective was the beginning of a transformation so complete that even you could not recognize the old self they thought they could destroy. They believed you were fragile, but fragility only existed in the shell that had to be broken for the real you to emerge. Like a seed split open underground, your breaking was not the end. It was the beginning of growth beyond anything visible at the surface. They could not comprehend that brokenness is often the doorway to resilience. They saw cracks, but what they failed to see is that light enters through cracks. And once light enters, darkness loses its grip. Their betrayal sliced through your trust, but it also cut away illusions, leaving behind a raw clarity that no lie could ever cloud again. What they mistook as your weakness was actually your initiation into a strength they could never measure. Every loss they celebrated on your behalf was simply the clearing of space for gain. They thought taking from you would leave you empty, but it left you open for something greater. They mistook your pauses as defeat, not realizing that pauses are where strategies are formed, where vision sharpens, and where determination takes root. They thought you had stopped moving, but stillness is not absence. It is preparation. Like the calm before a storm, your stillness was simply the gathering of energy for the rise they never expected to witness. And when you did rise, it wasn't just upward. It was outward, expansive, touching places they could never reach, radiating beyond the limits they tried to impose. Even now, as you reflect on the pain they caused, you can see the irony clearly. They were architects of their own downfall. Their hatred became the blueprint for your strength. Their cruelty became the training ground for your endurance. Their rejection was the key that unlocked your independence. They thought they were stealing from you, but they were investing in you unknowingly, because every strike pushed you further into your destiny. They cannot understand why the more they fought against you, the stronger you became. But strength forged in fire will always outlast comfort built in ease. Your story is proof that those who attempt to bury you will one day have to watch as you bloom above the ground they tried to keep you under. Chosen one, they believed their schemes would define you. But what truly defined you was your response. They threw words like weapons, thinking they could pierce your spirit. Yet your spirit is not fragile flesh, but tempered steel, heated and cooled by countless trials. They could not shatter you because you were not built on their approval. You were built on endurance, purpose, and the quiet strength that does not depend on applause. Their laughter at your pain echoed in the moment. But moments fade, and what remains is the strength you gained from surviving what they thought would destroy you. It was in the nights when no one clapped, no one encouraged, and no one believed that your inner fire was fed, a fire that now burns too brightly for them to ever extinguish. They believed that isolation would cripple you, that loneliness would crush your spirit, but isolation is where you discovered who you truly are. Alone, you uncovered voices of wisdom that cannot be heard in crowds, revelations that silence gifts to those patient enough to listen. In loneliness, you became your own encourager, your own builder, your own witness. You learned to walk without needing hands to hold you, and in that independence, you became untouchable. They thought stripping away your support would leave you weak, but instead it built a foundation so solid that nothing they do now can shake it. Solitude became your training ground, and when you emerged from it, you carried a strength they cannot fathom, because they have never walked through that kind of fire themselves. The irony of their cruelty is that it exposed their own weakness. Their attempts to sabotage you revealed their fear of your potential. Why would they invest so much energy in tearing you down if you were truly as powerless as they claimed? Their actions betrayed their envy, for they could see a light on you they could never replicate, a calling they could never counterfeit. They were terrified of what you might become if you survived their traps, and their worst fear has now come to pass. Not only did you survive, but you rose in ways that made their efforts meaningless. Their laughter has grown silent, replaced by stunned silence, as they witness the very rise they once said was impossible. Your rise is not only for you, it is proof to every silent soul watching that the fire of betrayal does not consume, it refines. Those who hear your story will recognize their own battles and find strength in your survival. Your scars speak a language stronger than words, a language that says, "If I endured, so can you." That is why their cruelty cannot erase you. Instead, it amplifies you. They thought they were the authors of your end, but they accidentally became footnotes in your testimony. Their names may fade, but your story will echo, because what is built through pain cannot be forgotten. What is born in fire cannot be erased, and what they meant for harm has already transformed into the foundation of your rise. Chosen one, when they measured your worth by their shallow standards, they could not grasp that you were being refined in ways invisible to them. They looked at your struggle and called it failure, but struggle was the workshop of your destiny, the place where every scar, Every tear, every sleepless night was shaping something magnificent. They thought you were stumbling, when in truth you were learning how to walk with purpose. They mocked your pace, not realizing that destiny is not a race measured in their timelines, but a journey built in divine timing. Every delay they celebrated was actually preparation. Every obstacle they celebrated was actually building your capacity. They believed you were stuck, but you were only rooted, and roots grow deep before branches rise. Their desire to see you collapse blinded them from the truth. Collapse is often the clearing ground for transformation. When they saw you fall, they thought the story ended, yet falls are only temporary positions on the path to a greater rise. You learned to gather yourself, to rise again, to move forward, even when your body ached and your heart was heavy. And in those moments, you discovered something they could never understand. Resilience is not the absence of pain, but the refusal to surrender to it. Every fall became a rehearsal for flight. Every moment of weakness became a lesson in strength. They cheered at your lowest points, not realizing that the lower you went, the greater the launch. Like an arrow pulled back, your setbacks were only building the tension needed to propel you farther than anyone imagined. They failed to realize that every act of cruelty planted seeds of greatness in you. Their harsh words taught you the value of silence. Their rejection taught you the importance of self-worth. Their betrayal taught you discernment. Even their absence was a teacher, showing you that you were capable of walking alone, capable of standing without borrowed strength. They thought they had robbed you of power, but in truth, they forced you to find the power within yourself, the kind that can never be stolen. And when you found it, nothing they did could shake you anymore, because you were no longer built on what they gave, but on what could never be taken away. And now, every step you take stands as a contradiction to their expectations. They thought your name would fade into obscurity, but instead, it echoes louder than ever. They thought your story would end in failure, but it has become a testimony of strength. They thought their fire would consume you, but it purified you instead. They thought your tears would drown you, but they watered a garden they will one day have to walk through. A garden blossoming with resilience, strength, and unshakable purpose. And as they watch your rise, they must face the reality that their greatest efforts against you became the building blocks of the very foundation they tried to destroy. Chosen one, their eyes were fixed on your breaking, but they never imagined that breaking would reveal the brilliance hidden inside you. They thought that if they pushed hard enough, you would crumble into dust. Yet dust is the very material from which creation begins. In their blindness, they mistook endings for annihilation. But endings are simply transformations, and transformation is the birthplace of strength. You carried your pain with grace, and in carrying it, you learned how to turn heaviness into power. They never understood that your strength was not loud but quiet, not boastful but steady, a kind of strength that does not fade when applause is absent. That is why their attempts to humiliate you only magnified your resilience, because humiliation cannot destroy those who know their worth. It only exposes the emptiness of those who inflict it. They surrounded you with doubt, hoping you would begin to believe their voices over your own. But instead of silencing you, their doubt became the mirror in which you saw your clarity. Every time they questioned your ability, it forced you to ask yourself what you truly believed. And in those quiet answers, you discovered that your belief in yourself was far stronger than their disbelief. They wanted to paint your reflection with failure, but reflections only reveal what is already inside. You chose to see strength, and strength is what emerged. Their judgment was supposed to chain you, but chains cannot hold a soul that has already decided to fly. There is a peculiar beauty in the way adversity reveals authenticity. While they hid behind masks of envy and bitterness, you were stripped bare, refined until only truth remained. That truth could not be broken, no matter how sharp their words or cruel their actions. They tried to cover you in labels, to define you by their narratives, But labels cannot stick when destiny has already written your name in bold across the pages of eternity. They said you were finished, but their words echoed with hollowness. Because even as they spoke them, your spirit was rising higher, defying every declaration meant to bind you. Their voices grew weaker, not because they stopped speaking, but because your rise made their lies irrelevant. And now, when they look at you, they cannot deny what stands before them. They tried to craft your downfall, but they became witnesses to your strength. They wanted to build a narrative of defeat, but they unknowingly built the platform for your triumph. They thought you were walking alone, but what they missed is that the very universe leaned in to carry you when their hands withdrew. Your rise is not accidental, it is orchestrated. Every heartbreak was a note in the symphony, every betrayal a chord, every rejection a rhythm, and together they created a melody of resilience that cannot be silenced. They wanted silence from you, but what they unleashed was a song that will echo long after their whispers fade. Chosen one, every moment they tried to erase you only carved your name deeper into the fabric of destiny. They assumed their rejection would make you invisible, but rejection became the ink that highlighted your story, drawing attention to a light they could never dim. Their plan was to bury you under the weight of doubt, but seeds are also buried, and when seeds are buried, they grow. What they mistook as your end was simply your beginning, for beneath the surface you were expanding, preparing, and pushing toward a breakthrough that would one day astonish even those who doubted you most. They could not see the roots forming in silence, the depth being created in secret, the preparation happening away from their eyes. And so, while they laughed at what they thought was your fall, they unknowingly watered the ground that carried your rise. Their efforts to shame you revealed more about their own brokenness than your worth. They mocked, not because you were weak, but because they saw in you a reflection of something they lacked. Envy has a way of disguising itself as criticism, but their constant need to tear you down only confirmed the magnitude of what you carried. They thought they were highlighting your flaws, yet what they truly revealed was their fear. They could sense that you were walking a path too vast for them to follow, and their ridicule was their last attempt to feel powerful in the face of what they could not control. But power built on belittling others is temporary, while power built on resilience is eternal. You endured, and in enduring, you exposed their hollowness. Even as they watched, they could not comprehend how someone they labeled as broken could rise again and again. They underestimated the force of persistence, the quiet refusal to quit when quitting seemed easier. Persistence is a language they never learned because they never had to fight in the silence the way you did. They never had to find strength in emptiness, never had to discover beauty in ashes, never had to stand when standing seemed impossible. That is why your rise confounds them, why they cannot explain how you survived storms they thought would erase you. Your survival is a riddle they cannot solve, a testimony they cannot deny, a truth that leaves them unsettled because it shatters every lie they built against you. Now, as you continue to move forward, you carry not just your own story, but the stories of countless others who have been silenced, overlooked, or underestimated. You are not just rising for yourself. You are rising as proof that the human spirit, when aligned with purpose, cannot be destroyed. The very ones who wanted your end will have to live with the reality that they became the background to your beginning, the shadows that made your light more radiant, the opposition that made your victory undeniable. They wanted to see you broken, but now they are forced to watch you stand unshaken. They wanted you buried, but now they are forced to see you bloom. And in that blooming, their schemes turn to dust. Their whispers fade into silence, and your presence becomes the answer they never wanted but can no longer deny. Chosen one, they thought they had written the ending of your story, but what they failed to realize is that the pen was never in their hands. Every plan they made against you was a chapter meant to close you off, but chapters are not the whole book, and your book is still being written with ink they cannot erase. They celebrated when you stumbled, But stumbling was never the same as falling forever. They rejoiced when you cried, but tears are not the language of defeat. They are the cleansing waters that clear the way for a new vision. They wanted you to believe that darkness was your only companion. But darkness is always temporary, and even the longest night must eventually bow to the dawn. Your dawn has arrived, not because they allowed it, but because it was inevitable. They tried to reduce you to a memory, a name whispered only in past tense, but your resilience carved a future they could never block. The very walls they built became mirrors reflecting their fear of your potential. Their voices carried venom, but venom cannot poison a soul protected by purpose. They hoped your silence meant surrender, but silence was your strategy. The gathering of strength before your voice shook the ground beneath them. They mistook patience for weakness, forgetting that patience is the secret weapon of those destined to endure. Every attempt they made to diminish you only magnified the truth, that your destiny was never in their hands, and no amount of malice could rewrite what was already etched into eternity. Look at the path behind you, the scars that once burned now shining like stars guiding the way forward. Each scar tells a story they can no longer distort, a story that proves you survived what they thought would bury you. You carry proof in your very existence that pain transforms, that betrayal redirects, that rejection releases. Their hatred gave you wings. Their lies gave you clarity. Their doubt gave you courage. You rose not despite them, but through them. And that is the power they cannot comprehend. They wanted to see you destroyed, but their actions became the very blueprint of your rise, a rise that now stands as a monument to resilience. And now, as you stand taller than the voices that once mocked you, remember this. Your rise is not only your vindication, but also your responsibility. Others are watching. Others are listening. Others are holding on to hope through your testimony. You are living proof that brokenness can birth brilliance, that what was meant to harm can heal, and that what tried to silence you can become the reason others find their voice. They will have to watch you glow in the very spaces they tried to keep you from, to hear your name where they wanted it erased, to see your face in places they said you would never reach. That is the justice of destiny. It does not simply restore what was lost, it multiplies it. Chosen one, this is your rise, and it cannot be undone. Their fire could not consume you. Their envy could not stop you. Their schemes could not hold you. You endured the breaking, and in enduring, you became unbreakable. You endured the silence, and in silence, you found your true sound. You endured the shadows, and in shadows, you discovered the strength of light. They wanted to witness your fall, but what they witnessed instead was a resurrection, a rebirth, a rise that they cannot control, cannot contain, and cannot deny. This is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of your greatest chapter. Step forward now, not with fear but with certainty, knowing that everything they used against you has already become the foundation of your triumph. And as you walk forward, never forget, your rise is eternal, and no force can bring down what destiny itself has chosen to lift. Even now, chosen one, as you walk forward, you carry a light that no storm can dim. Remember how they waited for your silence, yet what emerged was a voice they cannot mute, a story they cannot rewrite, and a presence they cannot erase. Every moment you continue is proof that their efforts were wasted energy, because destiny was never in their control. You are standing today not just as a survivor, but as a living symbol of transformation, a reminder that no matter how much darkness tries to claim victory, light will always find a way to break through. You are the evidence that pressure creates brilliance, that wounds create wisdom, and that endurance creates legacies. Let them watch, let them wonder, let them question, because the truth is undeniable. They tried to make you fall, but without knowing, they built the foundation for your rise. and your rise is far from over. It is only the beginning of something greater, stronger, and everlasting.